Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
One. Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose, serving others, and yes, achieving success. We believe when you can approach our work and our lives with a servant's heart, we can truly make a difference. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to make an impact in your world. And that's your world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, community leader, or simply someone that wants to have purpose in your daily life, this podcast is here to support and uplift you. So let's get the show started. I talk about impact. I just had a great conversation with my guest before the show. You're going to be blown away. He has done a lot of things, and he's done them very well, but he's also a servant's heart. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Steve.
Talked about class and people ask this question. I think the audience needs to hear an answer from this question because I think it's very important, especially you podcast hosts out there. What is a good interview?
A good interview is a conversation where the interviewer is a proxy for the audience. And so I think it's like if you were sitting down and having a cup of coffee with a friend and you're excited about what you're going to be talking about and you are engaged, which means you listen and respond to the conversation as opposed to going down a list of questions. That is a good interview. And that there's enough spontaneity built into it that you never really know where it's going to go. And as long as both parties are open to that, you can have a great conversation, and that great conversation can also be a great podcast or a great interview.
Oh, how many interviews have you done?
Is that including the times I've been arrested?
Let's include the arrest. That's a nice interview, by the way.
A few hundred times, I guess.
Okay. My point is, audience, this is not something he does 2 interviews, he's done it. And this is part of your work and what you do for your work. And that's really
right.
important.
That's right.
So I love inspiration. What inspired you to start Madoff Productions?
Well, Madoff Productions started back in 1982. And I had been working with a company and decided that I really wanted to start my own production company, go in the direction that I wanted to go into, tell the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. And it was interesting because I made a transition from my previous career, which I also had no education in. My first adult career was I was a clothing designer. So I designed and manufactured clothes. I didn't know anything about that business before I started it. I was 21. And by the time I was 23, I had 120 employees in an office in New York. I was based in Madison, Wisconsin. I went to college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And I had a double major in philosophy and psychology because I wanted to make sure that I got 2 degrees that would absolutely prevent me from getting any kind of a regular employment. And I succeeded.
Like typically a lot of college students, I had to say,
Yes.
students out there. Let's just be honest about that. Yeah, and it's interesting how you had so people listening, I want to hear more about why'd you go into clothing design, not knowing anything about it? How'd you get through it without any education?
Good question. I had graduated from school and I was working in this little boutique in Madison, Madison's a very cool city. And I did the buying for that store. I learned how to do that. And dear friend of mine, who his mother and my mother grew up together, called me up one day and said, listen, he graduated a year before me. He said, I saved up some money. Can you think of a gig that would earn more than bank interest? Well, I was sitting in the store when he called me, and I said, well, I see what we sell, and I've done some buying, and I can draw. I'll start a clothing company. And he said, okay. And he sent me what was at the time the most money I ever had at one time. Memory's a little foggy on both of us. I think it was $1,500. He thinks it was $2,500. In either case, it wasn't much, but I didn't know that. It seemed like a lot at the time. And I started a company, and we were doubling sales every 3 months.
That's impressive. Not knowing what you're doing, but I think the big part of that question, and I want you to talk about, is decision. You made a decision fairly quickly without knowing anything. How important was that?
Well, I think when you're young, your ability to assess risk is not what it becomes as you get older. So, I was fortunate that my parents raised me to be confident. And I felt that if something was interesting to me, I could learn how to do it. And so I knew a bit about the business, and my parents were retailers. So I knew, things about markups and that kind of thing. And I also had the kind of aesthetic that seemed to appeal to other people. So when I had some of the people that did our alterations and tailoring at the store, when I drew up some designs and picked out the fabrics for them to be made in, I could hang them in the store, and they sold out. Like 12 pieces sold out in one day, and we got 20 more, and they sold out really fast. So I didn't know what I was doing at that point, but I was kind of market testing, if you will.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I did that consciously. What I did is, I, of course, wanted to see people's responses. Would they buy this stuff? And they did. And pretty soon I packed up a bunch of designs, strapped it to the back of my Triumph motorcycle, and drove from Madison, Wisconsin to Chicago, where I had found a list of 18 kind of hip clothing boutiques, and made appointments before I went, met with 18 stores, sold 15 of them. And all of a sudden I hit another major obstacle that I knew nothing about. Was, so how do I actually get this shit made? One thing to sell a product, you got to also deliver the product in order to get paid.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. We're at a different age than the young people. So how old were you at this time?
I was
20s.
Oh, I started when I was 21.
Okay, so that's 21. And I always tell young people, what's the worst thing that happens? It doesn't work. Next, right. You find something else. I'm being very flippant about it, but it's seriously, that's true. A lot of people have failed. And, Warren Buffett, how many times he's failed. So I really appreciate that story. I want to get into production because I'm really excited to find out what inspired you, the production you did, Personality, the Lloyd Price musical. Tell me about that.
So, I've done a number of things, and the through line of everything I've ever done, from the clothing design to starting a film and video production company, teaching, writing, and the Lloyd Price play, which is the most recent addition to what I do, is that I'm seduced by the idea. I'll figure out how I can make money from it. But if I'm really seduced by that idea, if I really want to do it, I'll figure out a way to do it. And so, like so many ideas, this one started at a doctor's office. I did a phone call. I had done a film for the 75th anniversary of Radio City Music Hall. Wow. The executive producer for Radio City, who hired me, loved my work. We became friendly, and I get a call from him, and he said, "Do you know who Lloyd Price is?" I said, Mr. Personality? I mean, I know his music, but I don't know anything about his life. And he said, well, he's here with me at the doctor's office, and I've been telling him about you, and we want to do a short documentary about him. Could we come over and meet you? Sure. And on their way home from the doctor's office, they stopped in my office. We talked. Lloyd and I really hit it off. I was hired to do the documentary. And in doing the documentary and researching him, then interviewing him, I realized I discovered what an amazing life this guy had. And, he was at the crossroads of the youth movement, the civil rights movement, and the birth of rock and roll. And he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he was an amazing person. Most people don't know anything about his life at all. He was responsible because of how successful his first record was, which was Lawdy Miss Clawdy, recorded in 1952, which has been covered by everybody: Elvis, the Beatles, Chuck Berry, on and on, the number of people that have covered his music. And I was just so taken with his story, and it was a story that was untold. And I said to Lloyd, after I finished the documentary, he really liked it. And I said, I want to tell your life story, man. There's a story here that needs to be told. And what was interesting about Lawdy Miss Clawdy is, prior to it coming out, the music business was an adult business. Kids, teenagers were not buying records up until the 1950s. That's when that started with Lloyd and his era. And I think the top selling song by a teenager, or top selling song by a young person, and I'm going into their 20s, was They Call Me the Fat Man by Fats Domino. And it sold, I think, 29,000 copies initially, which was amazing. When Lawdy Miss Clawdy came out, and coincidentally, Fats Domino played piano on Lawdy Miss Clawdy. So that was pretty cool. But Lawdy Miss Clawdy sold over 1 million copies. So it was a seismic change in the music industry. And I thought, God, this is such an incredible, incredible story. And Lloyd was very open. We became very, very close friends. And he was very open in talking about anything. And when I wrote the first couple scenes of his show, and I got the biggest compliment from him I could get as a writer, because I had said to him, I know I can capture your voice. And when I read him the first few scenes, he said, well, I don't know if I actually said that, but I sure could have. And I love that. It was really cool. And the impact of Lawdy Miss Clawdy in selling over 1 million copies is it shattered the wall that was called race music. Prior to that song, if you wanted to buy a record by a Black artist, you had to go to a Black-owned record store. You couldn't get your music on white jukeboxes. And nobody is prejudiced against green. And that's what that song represented to the labels. And so Lloyd's life and career just skyrocketed from there.
It's interesting, successful people like that stay in the shadows like he did, because like you said, nobody knew his story until you're bringing it out today. This is how they live their life, right? Privacy. Right. Yeah, which is, we got to honor that and do that. What an incredible story. I've learned a lot about music in the last 5 minutes. I didn't know. And I'm assuming Lloyd Price is Black. And that's why he had this issue. Black.
That's correct.
Yeah, he sold 1 million copies, and Fats Domino did 29,000. That's an amazing story. Great song too, by the way. I'm singing it in my head right now as we speak. So I want to dive into teaching, because I think, and I thank you, I think all teachers need a double pat on the back, because it's important in this world and seems to be diminishing and not being as popular and all that stuff. What's most fulfilling about your teaching?
There's a few things. I think maybe the most fulfilling thing about teaching for me is that I am passing on knowledge to a younger generation. And teaching is a great way to learn. And so I'm constantly learning. constantly having to refresh and be relevant to the lives they're living, and doing what I think is incredibly important when you teach anything or when you discuss anything, is establishing the context for that. Words, phrases without context don't mean anything, because you can't assess anything if there's no context associated with it. So like when I told you that the largest selling record up to that point by a young artist was 29,000, but then when I say, and Lloyd sold 1 million, all of a sudden it's wow. And, I think that the teaching is both very primitive and incredibly profound when you are able to engage with other people, because I also don't think you can teach without learning. And I have boundless curiosity and love learning. And so the satisfaction also, because I taught for 16 years on the college level, wow, where some of the students became friends long after their graduation, and that they would reach back to me. One of my students moved back to Paris, where she was from, when she graduated in 2017. She would attend some of my classes via Zoom because of COVID. We were locked down and doing classes online. And then in 2023, she said, my husband and I are moving to New York, and I'd love to get together with you. And we've done that, gotten together a few times. We had brunch together on Saturday. And I just love that, because then the dynamic has changed, And meanwhile, when she went back to Paris, she got both a master's and a doctorate. So I love the whole exchange. I love the learning. I love the fostering of the curiosity. And I love the passing on of knowledge and being challenged. My ideas being challenged, me being challenged by the students. So it's that whole dynamic. And I think that there are no boring topics, but I think there's lots of boring teachers. And so on the first day of class, I tell my students, I will try not to be a boring teacher. And I don't always know what that means, but it's, I really enjoy it. And I love sometimes the relationships that go on for years as a result of it.
Sounds like engagement, honesty, authenticity, and building relationships is important as a teacher.
It's important as a human being.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I completely agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah. Those are the key words.
That's powerful. Audience,
would add empathy to that. And
empathy is perfect. That's a great one. Absolutely great. Our audience, if your teachers out there, listen to this over and over. Those 4 words he gave you could make you a better teacher. That's one. It could be $1 million heart hit, not a money hit, but a heart hit. Help you with your heart. So those teachers out there, or those students, what tips do you, what tip would you give them right off the top of your head to help them be better?
Pay attention, show up, be prepared. I've said to some students over the years, I said, you walk into class 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late. And to you, that's not a big deal. But you have your fellow students who you're disrupting, the guests, because I would have a guest every week in the class, a guest who you're not showing respect to, and me, who has put this whole thing together for your benefit. So show up, be present, do the homework so you can get the most out of what's going to be talked about that particular session. So I think that is really important. And, I think that as I have said to some of them, do you know if this was a job and it wasn't school, you'd be fired. Yeah. So you need to show up, and you need to show up on time and be ready. And, when you get fired, that's kind of like you're getting a D or an F, right? So I fortunately didn't have a lot of that. But there are certainly students that are in school Because they have to be in school. You know, their parents expect them to go on to college, but they haven't thought about what they want to do or what they want. And although it's a small percentage, I would say maybe over the years, 10% of the students I had were people that might have done military service, might have traveled the world, whatever it was, but they had a 1 to 4 year gap between graduating from high school and then going to college. Without exception, they were better students because they were there with a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose is something that is often missing from students who aren't even thinking about or asking themselves, well, why am I taking this? Why am I doing this? So I think that that's really important. And I think that listening is a gift that you give someone, which simultaneously is a gift to you because you'll receive from them in the same way. And I think that that's really, really important too. So I think those are the most important aspects to it.
You're an incredible man, Jeff. I mean that from my heart now, because it's emotional to me because I went to college at 40. I did exactly what you did. I was a star. I had all these kids follow me. High school, I was terrible. I was a sports guy. But you're right. I was afraid to go in. It was the best experience of my life. Didn't get my degree and things happen. That's okay. But I learned so much more. And I love that you told that story because there's older people out there I've talked to that want to go back to school. If you can afford it, do it. Like anything in life, go ahead and do it. So thank you. Being a great man, being successful, like all great men and successful people, you had some influences. What were some influences in your career that really helped you?
You know, I think, and I can't say that I actually looked at it as influences. My parents were very open. When they saw that I could draw, you know, they would bring home craft paper from the store. And in my bedroom, if I wanted to tape that to the wall and draw or whatever, I could do whatever I wanted in my room. That was my place. I could do whatever I wanted there. And they, through their actions, encouraged me when they saw there were things that I was interested in. And they never said to me, and this is something that I think is really important. If you're going to be an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor or in the financial world, nobody ever says to you, what's your fallback position? You know, but if you're going to be an actor, a dancer, a singer, a comedian, a writer, whatever, well, what's your fallback position? Your fallback position to me is this, and I've been asked that. And my answer was always, my fallback position is up here. It is my resilience, my perseverance, my savvy, my cleverness to figure out what the next steps are when there's so many obstacles in front of me. And that's what it is. And so I think that the influences that I had were parents that encouraged me and that gave me the confidence so that I felt I could tackle any task. And that's huge because a lot of parents don't do that for their kids.
Yeah. The other huge thing is what you just said about up here, I'm clever. Some people go, oh, he's egotistical. Absolutely not. He's confident. Confidence is much different than ego.
Absolutely. And it's also, you know, it's interesting. There's confidence and there's courage, and they're very different. And it's not about ego, it's about survival. You know, the question is, how are you going to survive given the obstacles you are inevitably going to confront? And if you fold up quickly, and I think the biggest word more than talent is perseverance, you're done. You know, if you can't put up with disappointment, if you can't get back up after you're knocked down, as an entrepreneur, you won't make it because inevitably, no matter how hot you start out, the shit's going to hit the fan. Things are going to happen. And that resilience, adaptability, and perseverance are absolutely incredible, incredibly important in terms of pushing forward in life.
So great. We're getting to the end here. I could talk to you all day. I'm learning so much. And I know you, our audience, are as well. I'm gonna get a little personal. If you could interview, you've done a lot of interviews, what's a dream interview for you, dead or alive? Person, historical, whatever.
Wow. Well,
It's a tough one, I know.
that's a well, because it's a very crowded, palette, right? I was because it's interesting. There's all kinds of people that I would like to talk to. Uh, Given that you could have a really candid conversation, you know. So who would I like to talk to? I'd like to talk to Billy Wilder, who is one of the great directors and screenwriters of all time. He did Some Like It Hot. He did Sunset Boulevard. He did what was I'm sorry, I'm blanking now, but
Okay.
he did Double Indemnity. So in every genre, from film noir with Double Indemnity to comedy with Some Like It Hot, he did every genre and did one of the best films in that genre. So he was a master storyteller, a masterful director, and he had a thing way back then in the 40s and 50s and 60s when he was active, which was he'd do one for the studio and then he'd do one for himself, meaning he'd take all the chances he wanted to because he made them money. So he had the leverage in the negotiation to say, this is what I want to do. So I'd love to do that. I think it would be amazing to talk to Abraham Lincoln and,
Yes.
what was going on in his mind, and what bridged the difference in him from during his presidency, when he wasn't initially against slavery. He wasn't going to abolish it initially. What happened? What changed? I'd love to interview Albert Einstein, and such an extraordinary brain and what he did, but very much a human being. I'd love to interview Sigmund Freud, and because he thought about thinking and all of that sort of thing. So, it would be interesting to interview Marilyn Monroe, who 70 years after her death is still iconic. And, and the pain that she had and the addiction she had and the challenges she had and all of that. So, I'm not giving you an answer because there's so many rich personalities out there that would be phenomenal to talk to and to learn from, and just what that is. So sorry I couldn't give you just one, and I really edited myself down just for that.
I can tell, but you told me a palette, so you were very upfront. You said, I'm going to give you a palette. So, and you did. And interesting about Marilyn Monroe, I would have liked to ask her, would you do it again if you started all over? I'd love to know the answer because all the pain, which a lot of people don't know, all the pain she had, which was pretty traumatic. Same with Van Gogh, his mind went crazy, but he was one of the top artists in the world. I want to thank you. You are a blessing. You've taught my teachers who are listening. You're doing some great things. How can people reach out to you?
Well, they can write a check.
Okay, and what's that number? Is it at 6 zeros or 5?
Yeah, when you're doing a play, a play is a startup. It's an entrepreneurial venture. So it's funny, like any business, you cross a certain threshold, and we're moving the show to London next. That's where we're going to be performing. So, that people can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and they can see some of the clips that I post from my class and some of the things that I've done. And on Instagram, on LinkedIn, it's my name, B. Jeffrey Madoff. On Instagram, it's at A Creative Career. They can go to madoffproductions.com and see my film and video work. They can go to A Creative Career and see some of that. And I have a book out that's based on my class, and it's called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. And it's available at all fine bookstores. And it touches on a number of the things we're talking about. And, I think that I'm very proud of the book. And from the feedback I've gotten from people, that's gratifying that it seems to have made a difference for some people. So that's kind of cool.
Well, Jeff, thank you. And what I've learned and audience wants you to take from us, we hear a lot of stories about entertainment, crazy stories, drugs and cheating and all that crazy stuff. Jeff's proved to us there's still many servants' heart entertainment. He's in musicals and plays. It gives me lots of hope and fun that there's good stuff out there and there's more good stuff coming. Me and Jeff want to thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. See y'all.